Well, hey, welcome back to another issue of Tennessee on Supply Chain Management. We are here live from the Supply Chain Management Forum at University of Tennessee Global Supply Chain Institute, live from the downtown Marriott in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's like, I'm going to make a joke, but nobody will get it because it's too old. Downtown Burbank. Do you remember that? What that's from, John? We are here with some special guests from Schneider Electric. We have Lisa Waters and Samia, Kaci, and Kelly Britt with us from Schneider. We're going to bring them to talk to us later about some issues related to talent management. They are all experts, one of our best recruiters. So we'll talk to them about that. Before that, Tom and I are going to cover some of the top issues happening with the economy and in the world of supply chain management, and then we'll pivot and introduce our guests.
Sounds
Tom,
like
what
a full
you got?
agenda. Hey, great to be here at the venue, the Supply Chain Forum. I think between member company reps and students, we're expecting about 600 strong to this.
600?
600.
Is that what you heard?
Yeah.
Wow. I was thinking half of that.
Yeah. So
I'm nervous.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's just amazing to see what this has grown, what it's become. But we're just so
when I got
giddy
to
and
University of Tennessee 20 years ago, we would meet at the Crown Royal Hotel in a conference room around like a U-shaped table. There's like 20 of us.
It's going to be hard to get 600 of us
Yeah.
around that U-shaped table. But no, this is just fantastic. And again, really glad to have some guests with us on the podcast today. But yeah, why don't we go ahead and break the ice a little bit, talk about what's going on in the world of supply chain and beyond. As you mentioned, we'll touch a little bit on the economy. And you continue to see conflicting stories, arrows pointing both directions, it seems, across a lot of different economic indicators. Did see that inflation continues to ease a bit, which is good news. Jobs reports are still looking pretty strong. Maybe a little bit in the non-government segment, maybe not as strong as government. But as indicated, there are things that are flat, there are things that are pointing up, things pointing down. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I try to find somebody that's got the magic ball. Potentially we're in a recession now. A lot of these things are lagged in terms of when we find out. The thing that's made the most sense to me that I've read is that this is going to be a rolling recession where it'll hit different industries at different times. Depending on what's happening with consumer demands, seasonality, et cetera. So potentially some industries are already in it. I know that some of our partner companies are already having to go through cost cutting, et cetera. So my guess is that we'll just continue to bounce along the rest of this year. Early 2024 is not expected to be a whole lot better, but then potentially start coming out in later in 2024.
Yeah, no, I think I'm arriving about the same place you are, and I do think that if we do enter into recession, it's not going to be a long, deep, or sustained one, and I think it's going to be a little hit or miss. I think there are going to be some segments of the economy that probably avoid it entirely. Now, one segment that seems to maybe be in it already, as you indicate, is maybe the transportation sector, right? Might be in a transportation recession. It could also be that our supply chains are just so front-loaded with inventory that we just don't need to move that much stuff.
Right. I mean, the story, obviously, if you've been listening to the podcast the last couple of months, has been, we just pounded on all that ordering and we built up inventory. And now we've got a lot of inventory, and so we're not ordering more. The thing that scares me about a freight recession is that freight is usually a leading indicator of later on economic issues, when we start ordering less, so in preparation for a lower demand in the future. But again, you have a degree in economics, right?
I do.
I
and
did
transportation.
not. I took one course in economics, I think. But what I love about being an economist, and we have dear friends who are economists, so I hope they don't get offended, but you can say, on the one, there, I think somebody said, some president said, economists are the only people with multiple hands. You can say, on the one hand, but on the other hand, but on the other hand, and never make a stab
there
at
was also
any
George
statement
Bernard Shaw who said, if you took all the economists and you laid them end to end, they would never reach a conclusion. And I think there's some truth to that as well. And you get as an economist, you start to embrace the art form that is ambivalence.
Yeah.
But to try not to be ambivalent, you're right. We ordinarily take transportation indicators. It's the most ready form of economic data we can have, right? If something moves, it's tracked, right? And I've always told my own, I use air quotes here, wealth manager, a former student of mine, I said, hey, watch the transportation data because it's true data. It's a bellwether of what's to come. But I do think that there was just, again, bullwhip effect, front-end loading of this stuff, and we're just waiting to clear out some inventory, which ought to mean that domestic freight ought to be moving, but we're seeing depressed rates in the ground transportation.
And you and I have talked about this before. The kind of interesting irony that's going on now is that consumers are continuing to buy, not evenly across industries, but they're continuing to buy. But consumer confidence is really low.
It's just it's in the pits.
I think you're negative if you watch any news at all.
Yeah,
you're just negative about everything in the world.
I hope that's not true of listeners to our podcast.
Hopefully not.
Right?
That we
Try
bring
to
a
provide
bright spot.
a ray of sunshine to things.
So let's talk a little bit about some supply chain things.
Talk about some rays of sunshine. There do seem to be some breakthroughs, and we had some labor issues at the ports. It looks like was it April Fool's Day? Was it April 1 when the West Coast workers went on a bit of a slowdown, called in sick and all that?
Yeah.
It seems like they are working through that. I mean, we're almost approaching 1 year of working absent a contract.
Right, that the contract expired.
And so it is encouraging, but I'm hearing some positive signs out of that. And then also the BNSF and the Norfolk Southern, I think, also are closing in on some deals with labor around
one of the big issues of that potential strike last fall was that labor wanted paid medical time off.
Right.
And evidently BNSF and Norfolk Southern have just negotiated in their contracts some medical paid time off. I guess UPS is in the middle of contract negotiations too. So a lot of labor issues happening. What else happening in supply chain?
Well, as mentioned, again, trucking freight rates have been depressed. And there's the suggestion that throughout the second quarter, they'll probably continue to be pretty low in the spot market. Maybe a good time to negotiate those contracts if they're coming due.
Ocean rates are heading back up.
Are they heading back? Well, they've
artificially controlled
1/10 of what they were.
Canceled sailings, all kinds of things.
Yeah,
Samia's nodding her head. We'll get her to weigh in on that later.
Yeah.
Global logistics for Schneider, so yeah.
Yeah, we'll probably pick up on that. And so as you indicated, just a lot of workforce issues, it seems, and maybe that's a good transition point for us.
I think so.
You threw over an interesting data point to me, I think it was just yesterday maybe, from our friends at Colliers around office occupations. I thought that was pretty fascinating that folks are supposedly returning to the office on a corporate basis, but maybe not on an individual basis. Is that what that data indicates?
Yeah, the trend that we're seeing, we get a lot of feedback from Colliers, is that they've hit and stabilized at about a 43% coming to work every day. This is in Chicago market, but they thought that translated to other major markets as well. So on any given day, and they literally get data from badge scans coming into the office, that 43% of workers are coming in every day, which means we're working with almost 60% empty capacity in office space.
Yeah, you look at a utilization basis, that's not so good. Maybe we need to turn those into warehouses.
Yeah, that's where we're really hurting.
On last mile fulfillment.
Commercial warehousing space.
Yeah, that's right.
That's still down, vacancy rates at like 4 or 5%. Despite all the building that's going on. So, but let's pivot to talent.
Let's do that.
We've got some research going on about the pros and cons of work from home versus work at the office versus hybrid as part of our supply chain collaborative. Really interesting things happening with labor. COVID, another thing that got accelerated with COVID was this specter of talent scarcity, which has been hanging out for a long time, but COVID accelerated it. 2 million boomers left the workforce during COVID, ain't coming back.
You threaten to leave the workforce.
I threaten all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
It's like every Monday, I think you threaten to do that.
Yeah. And so we are in a talent scarcity, and will be. It's not going to turn around. I mean, that's where we are demographically. In every industrialized market in the world, there's demographic changes that are causing scarcity, not in emerging markets. So we figured we'd have some of our friends from Schneider Electric come over from Nashville and join us to talk about this issue of talent management, retention, recruitment, development. How do you keep people with you out of this revolving door? And so we've got 3 folks with us from Schneider Electric. I'll let them introduce themselves, talk a little bit about Schneider Electric, and then we'll go into some conversation about talent.
Let's take a roll call.
All right. Well, for one, I'm really glad to introduce myself today as an HR leader and not an economist. So my name is...
You only have 2 hands, I can see.
Only have 2, yeah. And I like to make sure they land where they're supposed to. So my name is Lisa Waters, and I lead HR for Schneider Electric, the global supply chain team in North America. So happy to be here with you all today. Let Samia and Kelly introduce themselves and then maybe share a little bit more about Schneider high level and get into the conversation.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yep.
So I'm Samia Kaci. I'm leading the logistics for Schneider Electric for North America Global Supply Chain. I joined Schneider about 10 months ago. So I'm part of the, what is it called, the big resignation, right? After 20 years in the auto industry. So really glad to be here. Thank you very much for inviting us and being able to share our experience and vision.
Great.
Thank you.
And I'm Kelly Britt. I'm the Global Supply Chain North America Talent Manager, so also in Human Resources with a focus on talent management specifically. And been with Schneider for almost 9 years, but really thrilled to see all of the people coming in and having that blend.
And Kelly, you have a supply chain background as well, right?
I've always worked in supply chain, and then dabbled in some things, yes, as we do, yeah.
And Lisa, I can't remember. You have as well,
I do,
right?
yeah. So I came out of school with a mathematics background, so not HR initially, and was working supply chain inventory management and logistics for a produce company, Service and Walmart. So
I'm seeing a potential theme here that maybe one of the reasons why Schneider's so good at talent is because we've got some folks with supply chain background, like Samia. When you go talk to them, they kind of know the world that you live in, right?
Correct. Exactly.
And it's also a matter of balancing supply and demand. I mean, that's what we do in supply chain every day, right? You're just doing it with talent, if you will. Hey, I was wondering for maybe the audience that's not so well informed, if you could just give us a little bit background on Schneider Electric. I don't know who wants to take that question.
Sure, I can take it. So just high level, I think most in the room are probably familiar with Schneider, but for those joining, so we're a leader in energy management and industrial automation, Schneider Electric. So we are, our home base is in Paris, France. We're a global company represented in 100 different countries, and we have about over 130,000 employees across the world. In our supply chain team, we're over 55,000, and 17 to 18,000 of those supply chain employees are part of our North America team spanning across Canada, US, and Mexico.
Wow.
And we have certainly a passion to deliver to our customers with the most energy efficient and sustainable supply chain. So not only is that our mission and our purpose at Schneider Electric, but really digging in to make sure that we're helping that journey with our customers and our suppliers.
So ramping up energy production and distribution, maybe a timely issue in the world today?
It's a good place to be, right?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And what's the statistic I saw that if we did all the electrification that we're talking about doing, including electric vehicles, we have like 20% of the electric capacity to do all that right now. Wow. So the next, I mean, if we think 2050 is a date that we need to target, that we've got 27 years to really build this infrastructure?
Absolutely, yeah.
Crazy.
And you know, one of the things on talent, so hopefully we'll be able to add some value here today and share some of the things, but I will say, I think it's, we're fortunate to work for a company with such a strong mission and such an important work that we're doing. So it probably makes our job on the recruitment side a little bit easier because people are excited to come into this space and work with us.
Yeah, it's definitely true. And I'm a boomer, so we have multiple generations represented here. What are you? Gen X? You're Gen X? Yeah. You know, people would say that boomers traditionally just went where the money was, and you know, the passions of the industry, et cetera, weren't as big for boomers. But starting with Gen X, choosing the industry and being passionate about what the industry was involved in became important. Our students now are Gen Z. Not even millennials. And with millennials, it became really important that there were social issues involved with the industry that you chose, and more important with Gen Z. So you're right, that probably is a really good starting point for you. Let's talk about that. Without you all giving away secrets, you've been one of our most successful recruiters in recent years. Can you share some thoughts on what your perspective is on recruitment of talent? I'm talking mainly managerial talent, but I'd love to hear your take on hourly wage talent as well.
Absolutely. So I can start and then certainly share, because I think the three of us have some similarities in our perspective, but some differences as well. So, one of the things that has been really important to us, if I just even like deep dive into our relationship here with the university, is ensuring that we're not just recruiters. So yes, I'm in the HR department, Kelly's in the HR department. We have our logistics business leader here, and we've been really intentional about that with the way that we go out to the market and say, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is why we want you and what we can do for you in your career. And we really try to support that both from an HR function with that expertise, if you will, but also having our business leaders, our managers of these future supply chain leaders being here on campus and in the process that we do. So we've been very intentional about that. With our relationship and partnership here. As far as the hourly side, so that's a big passion of mine, and I think the core of that is we all spend a lot of time working, right? And you talk about the return to work or return to people as we refer to it at Schneider, and it never goes by me to think about our hourly associates have been there on the front lines all the way through, right? And so it's really important from a recruitment perspective, and just not just recruitment. I tell my business leaders and business partners, I don't think we have as much of a recruitment and talent issue. I think we have a retention priority that needs to be reset. So that's again my perspective. It doesn't make it right, but making sure our people understand what they do, why they're doing it, and that they are a part of the bigger mission, I think is one of the most important elements on the recruitment piece. And when we think about the multiple generations, 5 in the workforce today, being able to connect with people and where they are on their journey and making sure they understand that they can add value and have a seat at the table wherever they want to be at Schneider Electric is really, I would say, kind of the broader vision for our organization.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We've had some conversations earlier today. Daryl Edwards is in the audience. He led a session on leadership and culture. We got talking about culture. And Daryl, I'm going to steal your quote about culture. He best defines culture as, how do you feel about going into your job on Monday morning on Sunday night? Mm-hmm. Do you have a knot in your stomach? I've worked at places where I had a knot in my stomach that it's Sunday and I got to go to work tomorrow. I've had other times where I just worked all weekend because, hey, it's fun, What is your take on how you create a culture that's attractive to not only recruit but retain talent?
Yeah, I think you hit on it earlier about the different generations, and even it doesn't have to be millennial and Gen Z generation really wanting to understand what are their motivators and their ambitions. We're very lucky that we're a large company, and so we can serve in different facets to say, what is the thing that does make you want to come to work in the morning, and how do I get that for you? How do I get that development for you and put you in that space? So lucky in the sense that we have so many places and opportunities that we can do that in, but really focusing from that standpoint. When I typically talk with talents, it's not what job title do you want, it's what do you like to do? What do you not like to do? And what makes you happy? And then we can work further, and we have the capacity to do that. So it's really exciting to have that standpoint as a talent manager. I don't really have a lot of restriction in that. And even if I have to go out of global supply chain every now and then, we have other business units that we can offer to people and really understand what's their passion, what's their fit, and being very open to letting that change. So we have people fluctuate in and out of human resources in our own scope. We have people fluctuate into different areas, and so being open to that and really encouraging that to get more well-rounded. So you don't have to sit and stay in a certain place. You can take an opportunity and grow and learn, and I think that's kind of where we get a lot of our success, that you're not kind of in one chain or one line.
I thought she was going to say she's never had that feeling on Sunday night.
I'm very transparent.
Samia, maybe within the hourly workforce, maybe you could kind of speak to that attraction, retention, and culture aspect as it would relate to the hourly folks in.
I assume you've got probably a lot of distribution centers under your responsibility.
That's quite a good point. So within my cluster, about 80% of the population is actually hourly. And that, like you mentioned before, I believe we're still going to have, some challenges, right? So what is really important, and I refer to what Lisa says, let's offer the bigger picture, to our hourly folks, right? So I'm trying to bring, more meaningful to the work. And I'm actually launching a big campaign to say what you do is more than pick, pack, and ship. The box that you are preparing, that you are picking, that you are getting ready to be shipped could actually go to a construction site for an hospital, saving life. Yeah. Or this box could actually go to a construction site for school, education. So when you give this bigger picture, you kind of have the sense of pride. And I think referring to what Kelly is that we have more discussion about what is their development, what can they do, from where they are and where they can they go. One thing that I'm really trying to focus on is warehousing. As soon as you talk about warehousing associate, you talk about dark in the warehouse, dirty, dust. So I'm trying to revamp an image of the warehouse that is more attractive. So we have a great office in Nashville, and I'm actually challenging my team to say, why don't we have trees in the warehouse, right? Why don't we try to get, this kind of cozy, positive environment within our warehouse? Because the reality is that we will need those distribution centers in 5, 10 years. And how can we revamp that to attract people and to be able to develop?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's manufacturing involved in your business, but I'm guessing that for the kinds of products you all produce, distribution is probably the bigger operational arm than manufacturing. You probably buy a lot of subcomponents, or even your vendors are putting things together for you anyway. So
yeah. That's where we have the most time critical, I would say. Yeah. So especially that, with everything that has happened during COVID, increase of demand. So you have to be able to deliver and cycle those goods in a quicker way than what you used to be. So
I often reflect back to 3 years ago. I mean, it's April of 2023. April of 2020. No, it wasn't. It was April of 2020. We're scrambling times.
Okay, 3
years.
But,
and you all are in our Advanced Supply Chain Collaborative. The companies that were in our Advanced Supply Chain Collaborative back then, we got together every Friday during April and May of 2020 for a luncheon Zoom meeting where all of our folks got together and just talked to each other about how are you getting people safely into the workplace? How are you, I mean, think about back then, we didn't know anything. I mean, we still thought that COVID was on Amazon boxes that got delivered to us, remember? And we were just scrambling. And it always impressed me to have our operations folks talk about the key to everything was making sure your people, first of all, were safe and could get in to do the job. And the ones who had the best relationship with their workers were the ones that were able to innovate, and you had mentioned it earlier today, not necessarily at a profit, but at least do the job and get the product out there. And those times I think will always stay with me when we just stripped it all and got down to basics.
And what really allowed us, is that to empower our people, because we were managing everything through Zoom. We were not able to actually
we weren't
go on site. So we had to let them, take the quick decision of doing the right thing without, so that's empowerment remains after COVID.
Yeah.
One thing I would add on that too, just if we think about the talent attraction and retention, is the real work during COVID, at least what I saw at Schneider, was certainly we had the tools, the resources, the programs to help support our people and put their health and safety first. But the commitment from so many of our people to continue to come to work was really that connection prior to the pandemic, where they felt like their work mattered.
Yeah.
They understood that how critical the products that we were manufacturing and shipping were, and they made that choice, right? So I think that's something else. If we think about pandemic or otherwise, the relationships and the partnerships with our people, whether it's talent conversations, whether it's making recognition and just making sure that they feel like they're a part of the team and part of the bigger mission, is really, really important. And we had challenges like every company did, certainly during the pandemic, but we fared pretty well because of the relationships and the high level of engagement and commitment from our people, which was the work prior to the pandemic.
And certainly it was really challenging time for that. Samia, I don't want to give you bad feelings or bad memories about this, but we've come out of a period of time when the labor force in warehousing and transportation was growing like crazy. I mean, if you looked at the jobs growth, the biggest percentages for several months were in warehousing and transportation, which meant that all of your people could have gone out every month and gotten a new job with a new bonus to pay them to come to work there. So to be able to keep them coming in and staying stable was, I'm sure, a huge challenge for them.
Yeah.
You know, something, Ted and I were on a panel earlier today. We were on the receiving end of questions. Now it's fun to be on the giving end of questions. And the question we received that was pretty provocative was one of kind of a, not to say that we're post-COVID necessarily, but in terms of how things have changed and what's going to stay the same and what's going to be different. And I'm just curious from a talent standpoint, in your minds, what is kind of staying the same, kind of get on the far side of the throes of pandemic, and what do you think is changing?
So for me, I would say what stays the same for us is our commitments to our employees. What we've always had, we've always promised a meaningful, inclusive, and empowered relationship with them. Our core values, all of that has remained the same. Some of it had to go virtual, right? So some of our courses or some of our development programs, we've come out of that. So that's very exciting for everybody. But I think the big change for me is really just watching what people are interested in. Where do they want to work? You talk about a hybrid work option and 40% of the people in every day. I think we see that. People are coming in every week, but not every day. Personally, I don't go in every day either, sorry. I work out what works for my work schedule, but I think it's just having that balance and that conversation and understanding what works for everybody, and that it's okay that all three of us may have a completely different arrangement, and really finding that key point. Because I think prior to COVID, everybody kind of had a mindset of working from home, you weren't really getting a lot done, and efficiency, and we saw that that wasn't true. And so understanding how to meet people where they are and how to get the best for everyone to keep them happy and to keep it effective and efficient.
And we used to talk about work-life balance. And then for the first time, probably about 8 years ago now, one of our executives at an executive board meeting said, it's not work-life balance now, it's work-life integration. And again, that was pre-COVID. And I think COVID really drove that home about work-life integration. I mean, with the kinds of power that we have now with social media and remote media that we can use for meetings, et cetera, we truly work 24/7. Somewhere in that 24/7, however many hours that is, do the math, Tom, I'm not sure. We have to work 50 or so hours in there, right? And but now we kind of have the flexibility to choose when we do that, which is really a different world.
Yeah, and on the topic of flexibility, so if we think about the hourly, workers, whether it's a distribution center or manufacturing plant, that's one of the things that I would say is changing. Is we see that it's a business imperative, and certainly probably others here in the room do as well, that offering flexibility to our associates who do have a frontline job is very, very important. Whether that's part-time programs, whether that's flexibility with their schedules, whether it's a gig type of labor arrangement, which we are working to pilot in one of Samia's distribution centers to try to meet people where they're at, cast a wider net to bring more people into Schneider that are interested, have a space for those with a more traditional work schedule, but also recognize people may want that flexibility, and we want their expertise. So if you can do the job and you've got the skills, we want you to be a part of our team.
What kind of shifts do you run in your DCs? Are you like 2 shifts?
3 shift pattern.
3 shifts. 7 days?
Yeah, no, 5 days.
5 days.
5
So you do have a lot of flexibility there. Do you offer like 10-hour work days or 12-hour work days? Or
So that's the intention here.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And now we're talking about flex and gig workers, which just means bringing a new and different workforce into your operations. And, these are fast-moving operations too. As you talk about the number of warehouse workers we have in the United States is more than double now than what it was 10 years ago. And that means that the average experience level coming into our operations is quite low and even fleeting, right, as people jump around from organization setting to setting. And I'm just thinking about how you rally, again, multiple generations, full-timers, part-timers, flex-timers. How do you bring order to that chaos, if you will? How do you get anything done in these operations with people with such different backgrounds and really different motives for being there, frankly?
And a follow-on question, I'm going to tag on to this.
Oh, goodness.
How
this
do
is like
you,
a final exam question.
It is. Yeah, Lloyd Reinhardt. How do you prepare your operational level managers to deal in that environment?
Yeah, okay.
Right? How do you prepare them for that?
I'm glad I'm on the receiving end.
Yeah, really.
I'm giving this one.
I
Yeah.
think the first part will be Lisa answering
I
that,
got
and
the,
then the
I got the
second
questions
part.
nobody else wants to answer, huh? Yeah, so I think a couple things. One is training, and what I would find, and this is not going to be earth shattering, is we have good training programs. Many companies have good training programs. I think the real challenge is, are we taking the time to actually train and develop our people? Because we are in a fast-paced environment. There is a lot of pressure to deliver, but I think it's
Watch
easy
these
to
3
skip
videos
those
and
steps,
answer these
right?
questions.
So I think that connection and making sure that we're intentional about the training is key. To the point about the multi-generations, and then if we have this flexibility, people in and out, that's where the digitization piece is very important. So when we think about digital training, the digital tools and resources where there are the job aids, the click here, the watch the video, the watch again kind of a thing. So those are some things that we're integrating into our training and development. I'll pause before we get into the leadership or management question, because I've certainly got lots to say about that, but see if Kelly or Samia have anything to add.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is, and I would join what Lisa was stating, is that the way that we would want to prove those new techniques like gig economy is to really understand, simple operation first within our warehousing to prove the concept, right? And to accompany our supervisor to actually utilize those digital tools and then to build up to it, right? So I think we cannot speed up, we have to be really diligent to the way we do things. I understand that warehousing may look the same, right? But there are certain requirements within our warehousing that we have to respect for our customer demands. So we want to first test to prove the concept and then to build up to that. But definitely digital is going to be a big part of the success of those programs, to be able to juggle, right? And to make it really user-friendly for the supervisor, because you have to understand that they have so many lines to be shipped to keep the people safe and to still, juggle with the day-to-day issues that they may face.
Right, sure.
And I think it's the beauty of diversity. You need everybody. You need the experience, you need the new, you need everybody working from each other. You think about the experience training the new, but the new is also training the experience and things that maybe they don't understand. So it's those integrations, and as well the digital competencies. We were just in a factory last week where we were watching a drone help cycle count, and we were watching voice to pick. And so there's a lot of different integrations that we're all taking together, whether you started yesterday or 25 years ago, we're all needing to learn this technology as one and power the team forward. And I think that's what I've always been really proud of in our factories, is seeing the team come together to support one another. There's not really any issue with that, and they really take it on as one.
Yeah, and one of the things that sponsors, so certainly, moving into the gig workforce is something exciting and somewhat new in this space. There's certainly some other companies already doing it, but when we looked at the data of why people are leaving, right, it's important to understand, why are people leaving? What are they going to do? And oftentimes the demanding schedules were a huge proponent of, that was an accelerator on why they're looking to go do something else. So what we often find too, whether it's on the salary side or even in our hourly operations, is we were also getting a lot of requests in HR to bring somebody back. Let's bring Tom back. He's got this experience. We need to bring Lori back because she's got that experience. So it also started making us think like, well, they want to come back. They left for what reason? And that experience that they had, you think about a substitute teacher. Maybe the statistics have changed, but it used to be that 65 to 70% of substitute teachers were former teachers, right? Because they know how to come in, run a classroom, et cetera. So I think the diversity piece is really key.
Have you found that's improved because of the hybrid work schedule? Stereotypically, the reason why a lot of people, particularly as they're growing families, leave the workforce is because the cost of daycare, the cost of elderly care, they can't stay home. They realize that it would cost them more to put a kid in daycare than to go to work, so let's just stay home. I wonder if that's a better argument to bring them back now because of that flexibility in working hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's certainly been an element, especially in our offices. So, as Kelly said, we've had a return to people. So Schneider's not a full remote company. So we've taken the stand that, we're not a work from anywhere remotely organization. We certainly offer a tremendous amount of flexibility, but there is an expectation. We have a hub strategy, so we're expected to be in our hubs or, traveling, and we've got that freedom and empowerment to manage our schedules, but we are expected to be in office, those of us that are attached to an office, so to speak. So, but it has helped a lot to have the flexibility. In full disclosure, it's not perfect. There's some people that say, I don't want to come work for you because I want to work out of my house all day long. And if that's not our plan for that role, we can respectfully have that conversation and each party gets to make that decision, right? But it has helped for sure on the flexibility piece. And one of the reasons why we've, I'd say organizationally, the decision was taken globally, but I think for the supply chain, that's been really important for us because our people to deliver on the supply chain, there have to be some boots on the ground to do that.
Sure.
Right. And so trying to find that balance has been something we've been working toward. One of the things you said earlier, we talked about the talent side and you were saying what was changing, what do you think will stay the same? One of the things that I think is slightly changing is, and I saw this in union negotiations, you were talking about some other union negotiations, and we're seeing it more as people are interviewing and coming into our organization, is, pay versus benefits. So you're talking about medical leave. Certainly post-pandemic, we've seen that people are far more interested in what do the medical benefits look like? What do those leaves look like, whether it's medical leave, whether it's parental leave, also parent, flexibility with leaves that it doesn't mean that you have to have a baby or you have to adopt a baby. Maybe you have a parent that is elderly that you need to take care of. So offering those kinds of things, we certainly have seen that. I think the change I've seen the most in interviews I do today is it used to be when I was interviewing coming out of college, I was sitting in answering most of the questions and I had a couple of questions prepared because I was supposed to ask questions.
Right.
Today, we're oftentimes interviewed as much by the candidates because their priorities are there. And I think that's something else for us as organizations and us as managers, HR, to be thinking about that because that is something really important.
They're like that in class too.
Yeah, that teaching the class.
Where do they get that?
One of the things that is interesting to me is you mentioned that Schneider's based out of Paris, global company. From a benefit standpoint, has that been something that's weighed in your favor, that as a French company, your perspective on benefits tends to be different than a U.S. headquartered company? Do you find that to be true?
So that's a really great question. I think that certainly our global leaders, set our strategy. Benefits is typically a local a local topic. Now there are several global programs that we have, but there is a balance with what makes sense locally in each of the respective countries and regions. So it's I would say a hybrid.
Great.
Yeah.
So I kind of think about summating this experience. What I'm hearing is in terms of recruiting, retaining, developing talent, it sounds like it's not the same old algebra to some extent, right? I mean, it's not just a matter of
Sit down with somebody who's been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, we're
Learn
talking
from
about,
them for a week, and then boom, you're in it.
there are entirely new variables at play now, right? It's not just what can we throw at you in the way of pay for this number of hours and, run you through the gauntlet of training and let's see how many survive. No, but there are entirely new variables at play, which is really fascinating to me.
I think it goes to the point of the managerial side of saying, how does an operations manager handle this? We take it as a situational leadership. So there really isn't having a leadership style. It's how do I manage Lisa and how do I manage Samia differently and what their needs are. So that's how we train our leaders and how we anticipate it should go, and having those check-ins and those conversations and their weekly one-on-ones to make sure that I'm not just blanket across, everybody gets the same thing because I'm one leader, but it's really delivering to those people in their own way.
Well, whatever it is, you all have found some secret sauce, I think. So again, your experience with our students has been fantastic. One thing that I'll note before we break, we talk a lot about end-to-end supply chain integration and lack of and functional integration so we don't have silos. So many companies, we don't talk about these silos that often, but so many companies have HR siloed, and you'll talk to senior supply chain leaders and they'll express a lot of frustration with their HR groups. And I just think that the notion that you all bring to the table of integrating across HR and functional areas in supply chain, I think is really an incredible benefit to you.
Oh, thank you for that. Appreciate that feedback. And I think that one, as we talked about early on with me, I would have never made it into HR if Schneider didn't have that openness, because my first role in HR was actually with Schneider Electric. So I had come from the business prior and had intended when I came to Schneider, I wanted to join Schneider because of the supply chain, and I wanted to go run a distribution center, and I just never made it back that way. But to your point, and just on what I like about certainly the partnership that we have with UTK, and we've learned a lot from you all, is offering up, and you're familiar with our development program where talents can come in and do all different rotations to figure out what they like, what they don't like, and go in and out. And that's something that I think is building. I think that's the future of the supply chain, is to have the different perspectives because of the end-to-end piece, but that cause and effect, right? So the expertise is great and it's needed, and that's some people's path. But what we also see is being on both sides, the giving and the receiving, like these questions today. It's good to have experience on both sides to help develop your people.
All right. Well, should I tell John Bell that I'm quitting and going to work for Schneider?
You should.
Until next month.
Let's go.
Next Monday? Okay.
Wait till next month.
Hey,
Do this week.
Kelly and Samia and Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. This will be a great podcast. Our first video podcast, by the way. So that's
Pioneering the effort.
Yeah,
with us.
pioneering.
We really appreciate that. And I guess we're all going to embark from here, and there's going to be some networking taking place as well as reception. We got to figure out how to get our hands on some more drink tickets, I think. So
I know the people.
make
who
ourselves
control,
more
I know the people
popular.
who control.
That's an easy way to become popular.
It really
here,
is.
isn't it?
It's
Isn't it?
been the key.
But
to
thank you so much. Again, really appreciate your time and what you brought to the podcast. And with that, we'll close out another episode. Thanks, everyone, for joining us here in the room as well. It's great to have you.
Any comments, questions, suggestions for guests? gsci@utk.edu.
It's a wrap. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.